So yeah, welcome back. Week 5 this week. So it's the last week of this course. Just to let you know, we'll be letting you know about other things that are coming up afterwards, but this is the last week. And what we're going to do tonight is I'll just talk a little bit about friendship actually, and then we'll do some meditation. And rather than having the groups at that point, we'll have them at the end of the evening. And after the meditation, we'll do a bit of course. I'll ask for a bit of feedback really, how you found the course. And we'll have a break as normal. And then a little bit after that, Prasanna Deva will be talking about spiritual community, about in particular this spiritual community, the Triratna Buddhist community. Then he'll talk a little bit about what next, how to follow on from this course, and setting up intentions for that. So that's the basic plan for the evening. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a sense of the ground that we've covered over the last 5 weeks. It's amazing how quickly it's flown by. And yeah, basically we started 5 weeks ago with an exploration of the situation that we're in, basically, as human beings, as living beings. And we saw that we're in the same situation that the Buddha was in. He was subject to the same challenges and the same opportunities and possibilities as we are. And we heard about how he made the most of them. And we've dipped into the life of the Buddha in different ways, heard different stories about his life and how he developed to the point where he was awakened. He developed the fullness of awareness and love and energy and wisdom. And the whole thrust of Buddhism really is to recapitulate that process that the Buddha entered into, that process of developing those qualities. And what we've heard, particularly on this course, we've focused on this very central idea in the Buddha's teaching, which is the mind is absolutely crucial to that process of growth. So the focus, the thrust of the teaching is to look at the mind and change the mind, transform the mind. And we heard how the mind can function in 2 different ways. It's got these 2 different modes, the reactive mode and the creative mode. And how what we're trying to do is make the transition from one to the other. So that's what meditation's about in particular. Meditation is the mind, working on the mind. And we've learned these 2 meditation practices. We've learned the mindfulness of breathing, which focuses on awareness. And we've learned the Metta Bhavana, which focuses on kindness. And last week we looked at how we can get to grips with the reactive mind when it's arising in meditation itself, and how we can transform the hindrances into the factors of absorption, the factors of jhana. And we've also heard about the precepts, how those qualities, the creative mind, how it expresses itself in terms of an ethical life, a life that's sensitive to others, sensitive to the impact that we're having on others, and trying to make that impact as positive as possible, as skillful as possible. And how part of the Buddhist path of training includes looking at what we say and what we do. So that's ethics. And last week in particular, we looked at wisdom. We looked at how we can develop a perspective on our lives, a perspective on what happens outside of us, inside of us, that reveals the true nature of what's really going on. So that's how we develop wisdom. And we saw that that's not an intellectual matter. It's not a matter of a trick of thought. It involves a reorientation of our being so that we're living in harmony with the truth of change. And we saw that one of the really central aspects of living in harmony with the truth of change is gratitude, being sensitive and aware of what we've been given, and generosity, of actually expressing selflessness, becoming less selfish, less concerned with this idea we have of ourself and who and what we are. So we saw that, that wisdom is not just a change in the way that we think. It's an attitudinal change. It's a profound reorientation of our being at the deepest possible level. So we've seen the Buddha as a vision of what we can become, and we've seen how the Dharma has these three principal aspects. His teaching has these three principal aspects of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So what I wanted to do in this first half is tell a little story about the Buddha. And it's a story of one of his disciples who was in training. And it gives you a little bit of a sense of, well, what it was like being around the Buddha. And it gives you a sense of, in a way, quite an everyday story of somebody trying to practice the kinds of things we've been talking about in the time of the Buddha. So that the story is about a character called Meghiya, and it appears that Meghiya he was a monk, and the Buddha traditionally had an attendant, so he'd have somebody with him, and it was a little bit like a kind of PA for the Buddha. He would sort of arrange his invitations to meals. He'd help him with his food, getting his food, collecting his food, arranging gatherings of the local sangha. So he's sort of like a kind of a PA. And at this particular point in the Buddha's life, this person was a younger monk called Meghiya, and you get the impression that Meghiya was quite headstrong, maybe not as receptive to the Buddha as he could have been. And in this story, basically, Meghiya goes and collects food for himself and the Buddha. This was the tradition that these mendicants would live on alms. They'd live on gifts of food from the local villages. And so Meghiya had gone into the local village to get some food. And when he came back, he saw a mango grove. And mango groves are really lovely places in the heat of the Indian sun. They're very shady and cool, and they make a really nice place to dwell and sit in meditation. So Meghiya saw a place like this, and he thought, well, that would be a nice place to meditate. So he comes back to the Buddha, and they have their meal, and he says to the Buddha, I've just seen a really wonderful place to meditate. I'd like to go and meditate there. So he wants to go off on his own and practice meditation. You could say develop, a stream of skillful mental states, which, seems like a really good idea. Meghiya thinks it's a really good idea. The Buddha's not so sure. The Buddha says, stay with me a while, Meghiya. Don't go off. Stay with me a while. So Meghiya is a bit put off by this, but he persists. You'd have to have quite some neck to kind of ask the Buddha a question, and then when he says no, effectively, keep asking him. So he asks him again, and then and the Buddha says the same thing, and he asks him a third time, and the Buddha says, well, what can I say? If that's what you want to do, Meghiya, go ahead. So he's given up, really, the Buddha, on trying to persuade Meghiya. He just says, well, if that's what your heart's set on doing, then go ahead. And he goes away, Meghiya. He goes away into the mango grove to meditate, and he has a very, very difficult time. He's assailed by hindrances, basically, the sorts of things we talked about last week, but quite extreme hindrances, particularly related to ill will and cruelty. He's really assailed by some quite dark forces, and he doesn't really get on with his meditation practice very well. So you get the impression that you're kind of reading between the lines, that Meghiya comes back to the Buddha and sort of basically fesses up to the fact that maybe it wasn't such a good idea after all, and maybe you should have actually listened to what the Buddha was saying, and maybe there was a point to what the Buddha was saying. The Buddha doesn't say, I told you so. What the Buddha does is he takes the opportunity to give Meghiya a little bit of a Dharma teaching. So often when we make a mistake, particularly when our pride is wounded, we're a little bit more receptive, makes us a little bit more receptive to the wisdom of somebody who's got more experience than us. So this appears to be what happened in this case. And this is what the Buddha says to him. He gives him a teaching. And I'm just actually going to read it in the original, it's a translation of the original Pali text. And it's quite an ancient text, this. So this is what the Buddha says. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya. So sometimes it's translated as the heart's release, or the heart or the mind. That's the same mind that we've been talking about as having these two modes of reactive and creative. So when he says when the mind's release is immature, so you haven't developed the freedom of mind. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, 5 things lead to its maturity. What 5? Here, Meghiya, a bhikkhu is a monk. A bhikkhu has good friends, good associates, good companions. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, this is the first thing that leads to its maturity. Furthermore, Meghiya, a bhikkhu is ethically skillful. He lives restrained by the restraint of the Patimokkha. So the Patimokkha is like a list of training principles along the lines of the 5 training principles we heard about the week before last. So he lives restrained by the restraint of the Patimokkha, endowed with conduct and resort. Seeing danger in the smallest faults, he trains in the training principles he has accepted. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, this is the second thing that leads to its maturity. So the Buddha is basically talking about ethics, the importance and value of ethics. Furthermore, Meghiya, a bhikkhu obtains at will, with no trouble or difficulty, talk that is sobering, a help in opening up the mind, and talk on modesty, contentment, seclusion, non-entanglement, arousing persistence, virtue, concentration, discernment, release, and the knowledge and vision of release. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, this is the third thing that leads to its maturity. So this is the Buddha saying that it's really important to be able to get into communication with other people who will help you develop, will help you grow, will offer you a perspective. People who that will help you wake up to what's really going on, to be in communication with people who will spark you off, who will inspire you. That's what the Buddha is talking about. Then he says, furthermore, Meghiya, a bhikkhu lives with energy instigated for the abandoning of unwholesome states and the acquiring of wholesome states. So that's another way of saying reactive states and creative states, or skillful states and unskillful states. He is vigorous, energetic, and persevering with regard to wholesome states. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, this is the fourth thing that leads to its maturity. So he's talking about the quality of energy. So it's really important that we recognize that energy is required, effort is required. We actually have to make an effort to abandon hindrances, to work with them actively and consciously and deliberately and skillfully and sensitively. But at the same time, energy is required in the Dharma life. And the Buddha is really emphasizing that here, the importance of this quality, virya. And then he says, furthermore, Meghiya, a bhikkhu is wise, endowed with the Noble One's penetrative understanding of rise and disappearance, leading to the complete ending of suffering. So this is what we talked about last week, the rise and disappearance. So things come into being and things pass out of being. It's the law of change, the law of impermanence. And wisdom, the wisdom that the Buddha is talking about, is the understanding of that, penetrating into the true nature of that. So this is wisdom. Panya is the word here. So when the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, this is the fifth thing that leads to its maturity. When the mind's release is immature, Meghiya, these 5 things lead to its maturity. So then he says something kind of interesting. He talks about what those 5 qualities are based on. So what he says is, it is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends, good associates, good companions, that he will be ethically skillful. It is to be expected of a bhikkhu that has good friends, that he will obtain at will talk that is sobering, a help in opening up the mind. It is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends that he will live with energy instigated. It is to be expected of a bhikkhu who has good friends that he will be wise, endowed with the Noble One's penetrative understanding of rise and disappearance, leading to the complete ending of suffering. So I slightly abridged that last bit because with these texts, because they were originally memorized and recited, there's often a lot of repetition, which can get a bit tedious when you're reading them out loud. But the basic gist of what the Buddha is saying here is that those 5 qualities, spiritual friendship, ethics, Dharma discussion, energy in pursuit of the good, and wisdom, all in a way depend on the first one, which is spiritual friendship. If you have spiritual friendship, you'll develop ethics, you'll develop talk that is positive and inspiring, you'll develop energy, and you'll develop wisdom. So this is a really key feature of the Buddhist understanding of the training that we've been talking about. One does it in relation to others, and that's integral to the Buddhist conception of the path. That's integral to the Buddhist conception of the path, this relationship with others who are also engaged in that process. So the word for this is Kalyana Mitrata. So I'm just going to share a screen here. Here it is here. Hang on a second, I just need to do something real quick. There it is. Beg your pardon, sorry about the delay. Yeah, so Kalyana Mitrata. Kalyana means something like beautiful, auspicious, wholesome, good. And Mitrata means friendship. And it's a pretty straightforward. Mitra means friend, and Mitrata means friendship. So this provides the basis for those other 4 qualities, and I think if it doesn't take a lot of reflection to sort of see this, that for example, when we're training in the precepts, when we're training to be more kind and generous, contented, truthful, and aware, we need to ask ourselves, well, how do we learn that best? How do we learn that best? So we can learn that from a book. It's interesting, in the Buddha's day, of course, you couldn't learn from a book. If you learned the Dharma, you would have learnt it directly from a person. And I think in a way it's a similar thing when we're around people, we pick things up from them. We see an idea that we might have read about in a book embodied in a person. So I remember the example I often give when I'm talking about this is I used to work quite closely with a man called Vilasavadra. He's one of my Kalyana Mitras. He's one of my spiritual friends, and we worked together for quite a number of years. So I saw him, and actually we went away together and did did trade shows, and we spent a lot of time together. We're around each other all the time, actually, for several days at a time. We worked together, we spent time together, we were good friends, we played music together. And I'd heard about the importance of not speaking badly about other people, and by not spending a lot of time pointing out other people's faults, or, as we would say, slagging people off. So I knew that was something that was held up as important in Buddhism. But what I noticed when I was around this man Vilasavadra, this friend of mine, is he would never do that. He never ever did that. And even if he was frustrated with somebody, he would never slag them off. He would never criticize them behind their back. Only if things were really difficult would he even begin to discuss somebody else's faults as he saw them. He would never slag them off. So what that did is it turned what I had as a nice idea and a noble intention into something that could be actually done and lived from. And I picked that up from my contact with him. And it made it more real and more vivid than just hearing an idea in a book that, as noble and valuable as that was, it wasn't the same as actually seeing it embodied and seeing it lived. Because all of these qualities that we've been talking about, they don't really exist in the abstract. They only exist when they're embodied by a particular person. So we learn directly from others. You see this actually with children. You see the way young children, they just pick things up from their siblings or from their parents or from their little friends. They just pick things up. And in a way, I think that process continues, that we're much more porous to the influence of others than we realize. And I think this is what the Buddha is pointing to when he's telling this character Meghiya that he needs to be open to others much more than he is. You get the impression that he's quite headstrong. He thinks he knows everything about everything, but he actually just needs to be much more receptive to other people with more experience. So this points to one of the things about the Buddha. So the Buddha, of course, gained enlightenment. He became the awakened one. He taught the Dharma. He taught this path, which we've been discussing over the last 3 weeks. But he also founded a community. He founded a community of people who were engaged in this process of growth. Sorry, I've just realised I'm still sharing the screen there. Sorry about that. You're probably all thoroughly familiar with the word Kalyana at this stage. Yeah. So, oh, sorry. So, Sangha. This thing he founded as Sangha. Sangha means spiritual community, and what it really amounts to is people training, but training together, friends training together, and friendship between individuals is really the basis. It's really the sort of building blocks of community. We'll hear more about that after the break. More about the spiritual community. Prasanna Deva will go into it in a bit more depth after the break. But I just wanted to point out the gist of it, really, which is the importance of personal relationship with others who are practicing. Another illustration of this is the importance of the precepts. We looked at them a couple of weeks ago. These principles of training, as they're called, training principles, generosity, kindness, contentment, and so on. And because they're not rules, because they're principles, it means that we have to putting them into practice as a matter of personal responsibility. It's a matter of looking at the situation of our lives and trying to work out how we can put those principles into practice in the actual conditions that we live in. And very often, it's not a straightforward matter. And we need to be able to discuss it with people to try and get a perspective on what the dilemmas are, the ethical dilemmas are in our life, so that we can actually put them into practice. So that's, I think, one of the other functions of the spiritual friendship I'm talking about is providing a context in which we can discuss these really important issues that are arising in our lives, and trying to explore how we can put the principles of the Dharma, the ethical principles, into effect in our lives. So what I want to do now actually is explore, actually just do some Metta Bhavana. And what I suggest you do is, what we're going to do is just bring to mind at the beginning somebody who we admire, someone who we feel has got a perspective that's just deeper than ours, or has qualities that we appreciate. This is a traditional way of doing the Metta Bhavana. You actually start with a Kalyana Mitra, actually, a teacher or a spiritual friend, and you start from that point. So I thought we could try that just as a different way into the practice, and also just to illustrate this point. So I'd invite you just to get into your, if you want to get into your meditation posture, and when you're all ready, we'll make a start. So for the moment, just letting go of what we've been talking about. and letting go into your present experience. So as we let go into our present experience, we can let go of things, events from the day, niggles or worries, and just tune in again more and more deeply to what's happening presently. So first of all, just having a sense of our surroundings, having a sense of the place where we are. That includes sound. And it includes a sense of our experience occupying space. So we exist in the place where we are, and we take up a portion of that space. Our body does. And being sensitive to the sensations that arise in our body, in that space. Sensations of touch, sensations of weight, sensations of temperature. We can also have a sense of the vitality or lack of vitality in our body. And our overall mood. Remembering that wherever we are, however we are, is where we start from. So there's no wrong place to start from. If we don't feel very well right now, that can be a basis for metta. In the same way that feeling really well and happy can be a basis for metta. So connecting from whatever's going on, taking whatever arises as our path. And beginning by bringing to mind somebody that you are in contact with in some way, whose qualities you admire, who benefits you through their contact with you. So bring into mind someone of this sort. And really focusing on what their particular qualities are. What is it about them that you appreciate and admire and benefit from? And there may already be a feeling of well-wishing towards them, which you can just enjoy as you give your attention to it. Or you could use a phrase if you want. So metta for that Kalyana Mitra. And then metta for yourself. That might already be there as a result of bringing to mind your friend, and you can just let that momentum continue, let it flow on. Remembering that we're concerned with the heart's release, the mind's release through metta. Then bringing to mind a good friend. So you don't need to use any force to do that. It's a creative, imaginative act to bring someone to mind. So again, you might like to think of your friend's particular qualities. What makes that person that person? And letting metta flow as your awareness of the reality of their life deepens. Using the phrases if you wish, and not using the phrases if you don't. And then just letting your friend move into the background. And just sit, particularly sitting, as it were, in the heart, even in your belly. So just being sure that you're connected to your heart, connected to your emotions. And relaxed, face relaxed, shoulders relaxed, belly relaxed. and bringing to mind a neutral person. Bringing them to mind as vividly as you can so that you really have a sense of them as being real, of being alive, of experiencing, feeling, thinking, responding. Allowing metta to flow outwards towards them also. Checking that you've got a clear sense of the neutral person. And again, just checking that the face is relaxed, the shoulders, the belly, that you're aware of your emotional center. And bring to mind someone that you find difficult. And include them in your metta also. And then in the last stage, bringing to mind each of the people who've been in your meditation thus far. So there's your Kalyana Mitra, your beneficial friend, yourself, your friend, the neutral person, the difficult person. So metta for each equally. And then radiating metta outwards. May all beings be happy. May all beings be secure. And then just sitting.
Hey everyone. So this evening I'm going to talk to you all about the three jewels, in particular the Sangha jewel, but generally the three jewels. And just in case you're not familiar, I think it was probably covered, but I'll reiterate. The three jewels are essentially are Buddhism. They are together. They make up the whole of what Buddhism really is. We say they're the three most precious things for a Buddhist, but in a way, it is Buddhism. And these three jewels consist of the Buddha, the ideal of enlightenment. We have the image here. His teaching, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the spiritual community, which we've heard a bit about from Yanadara already. So it's often asked, how do you become a Buddhist? And essentially what we would respond with is, a Buddhist is someone who goes for refuge to these three jewels. Someone who goes for refuge to the three jewels. So I'm going to explore this a little bit. I'm going to illustrate it initially with a little example, again from the Pali scripture, from which Yanadara was told us the Meghiya story from earlier. So I'll just read it out, basically. So this is a wandering disciple, not yet disciple, someone who's kind of a wandering spiritual man, a sadhu, and he's come across the Buddha, and the Buddha's just giving him a really profound teaching, a really impactful, transformative teaching, and his response is like this: "Magnificent Lord, magnificent, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to point out the way to one who was lost, to carry a lamp in the dark, so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way has the Blessed One, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear." Dhamma here is the Pali word for Dharma. "I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma and to the Sangha." So these kinds of exaltations we hear again and again in the scriptures. We would have heard a lot of, particularly this one, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned. You'll hear that again and again in different places. And similarly, we hear, "I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma for refuge, to the Sangha for refuge." So again and again is this repetition of going for refuge to the three jewels. So this is essentially how you become a Buddhist. You go for refuge to the three jewels. And what this is really about is committing to these three jewels. And this is something that you do rather than just something that you call yourself. So commitment in this sense is not something that you're just, say maybe born into a Buddhist tradition, and you may not meditate, you may not practice the precepts, you may not really do anything, but you'd call yourself a Buddhist because that's sort of the convention. That's not necessarily what we would say would make you a Buddhist, because the commitment to the practices are not there. We usually think about going for refuge. But often it's thought about as conversion. So my partner is a Japanese. He has a BA in Japanology and studied Japanese language, and he was doing some work translating some Buddhist texts that in our tradition back into Japanese. And the Japanese word for going for refuge is synonymous with conversion. So in those traditions, going for refuge is basically about chanting some verses about going for refuge, and in that you're converting to Buddhism. But we would say that it's more about the commitment. It's more about the way that you live your life, the things that you do, the practices that you imbue your life with. So you may notice that Buddhism can look drastically different around the world. So I've already mentioned Japan, so I might as well start there. In Japan, you have Zen Buddhism. And in Zen Buddhism, you may not even have an image of the Buddha in place. You'll have people sitting, meditating, looking at blank walls. You'll have very minimalist, very little imagery or anything like that. But then if you go to Tibet, in the Himalayan plateau, you'll have just, so much noise. You'll have instruments banging, percussion banging, horns blowing. You'll have chanting. You'll have all these images of deities and wrathful deities, and full of color and costume. The whole, it'll be a big, almost like a big festival. So really drastically different. And the reason for this is that the Buddhist tradition has developed in different places in a particular context. It's developed in a particular time and place with particular people. And in that, it has taken on board, or has synthesized and kind of encompassed the more indigenous practices or sensibilities of a particular culture, based in the time and place in which Buddhism reached those places. And we ourselves are a particular branch of Buddhism in a particular time and place, or a particular branch having developed in the modern West. So just in case you don't know already, the Dublin Buddhist Centre is a part of the Triratna Buddhist community. And this community was founded in London on Monmouth Street back in 1967 by a man called Sangharakshita, who Nyanadara was just talking about there. So he's our teacher and founder, and he spent many years in India, particularly in the northeast of India, although he did spend some time down on the plains, very connected with the ex-untouchable communities, who were the ex-Dalits, who had faced a lot of discrimination due to the caste system. And there was a great mass conversion of this community to Buddhism, and he was quite instrumental in teaching Buddhism to them when their leader, Dr. Ambedkar, died. But he came back to the UK in the early 60s, and then in 1967 he decided to set up his own order, originally called Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, the Western Buddhist Order, and by extension the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, and sometime later the name was changed to Triratna, which means three jewels, essentially. And what he did really was he shared kind of three main things with us, his teachings. So what he taught us was that the essential basis of, or the central doctrine of Buddhism being conditioned co-production. He shared with us the teaching, particularly through this work called the Survey of Buddhism, which was kind of an overview of all the Buddhist traditions of the time. And he was able to teach with an immense clarity. He was just extremely clear about the Buddha's teaching, and could make it very relevant to us today. And it was in the 60s, but still kind of in a modern Western world, you can make it very, very relevant. He also shared with us and communicated to us the symbols of Buddhism, in particular the symbol of the Buddha, the symbol of the Bodhisattva and the Bodhisattva ideal, the idea of practicing Buddha for the benefit of all living beings, so that all living beings can be free from suffering. He taught us about the tradition-specific deities, like the archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, those beings who practice for the benefit of all. And he taught us the practices, such as the Metta Bhavana and the mindfulness of breathing, which we have learned in this course, and things like the 5 ethical precepts or the training principles, which we also covered on this course. And he gave to us a lot of talks and seminars, a huge amount of material from which we can draw from today. And you can find a lot of that stuff online on a website called Free Buddhist Audio, along with a lot of other talks by other order members. So over the years, there developed in our tradition particular emphases. So a bit like when I was saying Zen Buddhism or the Tibetan Buddhism, they will all have particular emphasis in what is drawn out in their traditions. And the Triratna Buddhist tradition is no different. We have particular distinct emphases. So I'm going to share some of those now. I'm just going to share the screen. So these are the 6 emphases. The first one I've already kind of referred to, which is the centrality of going for refuge. So it's not considered generally throughout the Buddhist tradition that going for refuge is what makes someone a Buddhist, but this is something in particular that Sangharakshita has drawn out. Sangharakshita decided that he was going to found an order rather than just creating a club or a society or anything like that. He wanted to create an order. He wanted ordination to be a part of that. And ordination is really, by extension, a witnessing of someone's going for refuge, their effective practice in going for refuge to the Three Jewels, being witnessed by others who are also effectively practicing and going for refuge. So that's why he distinctly decided it was going to be an order rather than something else, some other like group or society of Buddhists. The second is spiritual friendship, which we heard a bit about in the first half. Spiritual friendship is kind of I just describe it as the medium through which we practice the going beyond ourselves. It's the medium through which the Dharma comes alive is through spiritual friendship. As Nyanadhara said, in the Buddha's day, things weren't written down. It was always communicated on a personal level, face to face, through the memorization of the Buddha's teaching and it being repeated again and again. And that face-to-face human interaction would have been communicated within the spirit of friendship. So that, again, this is something that is particularly drawn out in our tradition here in Triratna, is that spiritual friendship is the medium through which the Dharma arises. It is the practice of going beyond ourselves, ultimately becoming friends with all living beings. The third is that it's a unified order. So some more traditional orders, particularly in the kind of the oldest traditions, there may not be the same ordination for men and women, for example. Whereas in Triratna, the ordination for men and women is exactly the same. There's no differentiation there. So there's no sort of biases there. The fourth one is team-based right livelihood. So this specifically is related to Buddhist businesses in a way. So back in the day, you'd have a group of Buddhists come together, working together, bringing Buddhist ideals into the workplace, working closely together and supporting oneself through that activity. There aren't a lot of those out there anymore, but the spirit of it really is about bringing a dharmic perspective into every single aspect of your life, which you can do, even if you're not working in a team-based right livelihood. I'm lucky enough to be working in the centre here at the minute, so I do have that team-based right livelihood context. But before that, I was always just trying to bring a dharmic perspective into my livelihood. And that's, again, a distinct emphasis in our tradition, is to try to create contexts in which we can be fully living the Dharma life, the spiritual life, in every aspect. I also live in a Buddhist community with other Buddhists. So when I go home, I'm also living with Buddhists, and we meditate together and eat together and all that kind of thing. The fifth distinct emphasis is that we are an ecumenical tradition. So luckily, we found ourselves in a place in history where there is history, where there is a sense of there being some histories that we can look back at and survey all the different traditions that have arisen. So I talked about the Zen tradition in Japan. You have the Tantric tradition in Tibet. You have early Indian Buddhism. You have the Theravadan tradition in Sri Lanka, and so on and so on. There's a whole myriad, and even within those traditions, there's even more schools and different approaches. So we have the benefit of looking at all of these different traditions and drawing from them what Sangharakshita calls basic Buddhism, the essential, what is essential and common to all of these traditions. We can draw inspiration from whatever form they have been expressed through in all those different traditions. So one person might be particularly drawn to the aesthetic of the Tantric Tibetan tradition. They might love the rich colors and the symbols of that. And basically, what Sangharakshita was saying is that all of these different expressions are expressing the same basic principles of Buddhism, but in a different. It's been re-expressed in a new form. We don't align with any one particular tradition. We draw inspiration from all the different traditions, and but it's grounded in what Sangharakshita calls basic Buddhism, that which is common to all those different traditions. And lastly, the arts. So there's a distinct emphasis placed on the importance of the arts in the spiritual life. And this was a big thing for me. I studied fine art in college. I'm a lover of art, of not just painting and fine art, but poetry, cinema, literature, the whole shebang. And and I very distinctly feel like I am part of a Western tradition when it comes to the arts. So it wouldn't feel natural for me, because I'm a Buddhist, to just start taking on like Indian literature or Indian painting and feel like I have to like Buddhist Indian painting because I'm a Buddhist now or something. That would have never felt right for me. I strongly identify as being a Westerner with a whole tradition of art and music and poetry there that I can draw inspiration from. And Sangharakshita has really emphasized the importance of not abandoning the art forms that resonate with us. That art in the Western world can be used to augment and support our spiritual life, can allow us to elevate and refine our consciousness. I remember I was studying the Four Quartets by T.S. Eliot with another order member. We were working our way through it. And I decided to listen to a podcast about it. And it was like three academics and one, I'll actually turn off the screen now. There was three academics and one poet, and they were in discussion about T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets. And all the academics were really, really concerned about why he said this, why he said that. This is because he had a turbulent relationship with his wife. This is because he was a Catholic and he feared the wrath of God. And this is because, and they were kind of just ripping it apart. And it really did nothing for me. But there was the poet there as well. And he seemed to be just kept coming back to this idea. It's like, you're not thinking about what T.S. Eliot was trying to do here. He was trying to raise their level of consciousness. He was trying to raise their levels of consciousness with this poem. And that just sort of resonated with me in terms of what Sangharakshita was saying. What good art should be doing is raising our level of consciousness, refining our mind, and making us more alive and sensitive to the lives of others and to our own existential situation. So let me see now. Just get my notes up again. Okay, so I hope that's kind of given you a sense of what the Triratna community or Sangha is about, what makes a Buddhist, and what makes us Buddhists as Buddhists within the Triratna community. So what I want to just kind of talk briefly now about is kind of what next. So you may have picked up on something from this course that you want to follow up on, or something has inspired you and you want to continue to pursue that inspiration in some sort of way. So some ways in which you can do that would be through more courses. And actually, there's a course starting tomorrow called The Greater Mandala. I mentioned this briefly last week, but I'll just mention it quickly again. It's a course, a 5-week course about going beyond self and other. It's exploring the tension between needing to focus on developing and growing in yourself, but also needing to get beyond the self and attending to the needs of others. And this creates a sort of tension. And it's about exploring how this tension isn't necessarily a problem, but actually can be the driving force of your spiritual life. So that's going to be starting tomorrow for 5 weeks with Pranimai and Rijamuni. It's not too late to sign up for that. You can sign up on the website. But we also have drop-in sessions that you can come to. We have drop-in meditations on Tuesday evenings. So there's one actually happening now. And that's followed by a ritual, a puja, that you're welcome to stay for as well. We also have pujas on Sundays with a short meditation before that as well. And those are hybrid, so you can either do that in person. There are some limited spaces, but you can come in person. But you can also join online. We also have morning and lunchtime meditation drop-in sessions. You'll find that the links for those on our website through the events section. And the morning is at 7:30, and the lunchtime is 1:15. And they're only online, those two. The other thing is we usually provide is retreats. The retreats are a really, really good way of getting deeper into your meditation practice in particular, but also having a sense of Sangha, connecting with others that are also practicing what you are practicing. At the minute, we usually have a winter retreat, and that's we're working on what that's going to be at the minute. So that's to be confirmed still. But we've always been putting on a winter retreat after the day after Stephen's Day until into the new year. It's usually a week long. But to keep up to date on that and other events, there will be more courses being going up shortly. I will include a link to sign up to our weekly Sangha mailouts. So they go out once a week, and feel free to sign up for that. And that's the best way to keep up to date with what will be coming up. Okay, so we're going to break into our groups shortly. But first, I'll just mention 3 questions that we can use to help us to just report in, or report out rather at this stage of the class. So the first question is around meditation. So how are you going to maintain and develop it? How are you going to maintain and develop your meditations? So be specific on that. You can kind of say, oh, I'm going to meditate at this time in this place, or I'm going to do another course, and try to be specific about that one. The second question is, could you say one other practice that you'd like to keep and continue with after this course? So we talked about things like the precepts, for example. So maybe you could choose one of the precepts that you want to really get into. Maybe it's generosity or kindly communication or something. The third question is one thing you will attempt to keep in contact with other practitioners. So what might you do to try to create conditions where you're in contact with other people who are also meditating or practicing Buddhism? So let's say those again. How are you going to maintain and develop your meditation? One other practice to continue after this course, and one thing that will keep you in contact with other people practicing. Okay. So Dave, whenever you're ready, if you want to get the groups going. And so I hope that was enough time for everyone to have a bit of a reporting out and set some intentions for the future. So just to close off, I just want to remind you just very briefly again, do consider giving us a donation, and it will make a really big difference to us. It's also a wonderful way for you to sort of kind of be part of the project of the Buddhist Centre, and please feel free to come along to more courses and our events, and just join in that way as well. I invite you as well, if you have any last questions that you haven't had answered, please stay on after the class. Myself and Yanadara will hang out for a few minutes afterwards, and we can answer any questions that haven't been answered. And other than that, I think that will be it. So thank you so much, everyone, for sticking with us for the 5 weeks. And I hope to see you all again in the future. And thank you as well to all of our team leaders, and to David as well, or tech extraordinaire. So and of course Yanadara as well, my co-leader on this course. So be well, and thank you all. Take care.